faith negotiation. And then, yes, you have some crazy people at the fringes of the Iranian system who are leaking anonymously, either for propaganda purposes or because they're embarrassed or because they don't like what happened. And the final point, when I say they don't like what happened, what we know is that the United States accomplished its military objectives. What we know is the United States could have imposed significant additional military and economic costs on Iran and still has the capacity to do so. But we thankfully at this point, I think, have a ceasefire, thanks to the leadership of the President of the United States. We have the Iranians promising to open the Straits of Hormuz, and we have a negotiation that's supposed to start this weekend. That's the truth. I think it's a good first step. We're going to see if we can make more progress here in the days to come.
So you're negotiating partners.
Go ahead, yeah. Go.
There seems to be a disagreement about whether Lebanon was included in this proposal. And the
Yeah.
Speaker of the Parliament, you're going to sit across from the table from Islamabad, has just said that he thinks negotiations will be unreasonable while that war is ongoing. So would you ask Israel to hold off strikes to allow some forces on?
Well, first of all, I know there's been some conversations between the Israelis and the leadership of our country today. I haven't been involved in that because I've been busy doing stuff in Hungary. I'm actually supposed to get an update when I get on the plane. But let me say a couple things. First of all, I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on. I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. Now, that said, the Israelis, as I understand it, again, I'm supposed to get a fuller report when I get on the plane, have actually offered to be, frankly, to check themselves a little bit in Lebanon because they want to make sure that our negotiation is successful. That's not because that is part of the ceasefire. I think that's the Israelis trying to set us up for success, and we'll of course see how that unfolds in the next few days. But look, if Iran wants to let this negotiation fall apart in a conflict where they were getting hammered over Lebanon, which has nothing to do with them and which the United States never once said was part of the ceasefire, that's ultimately their choice. We think that would be dumb, but that's their choice.
Mr. Vice President, Iran is continuing to block the Strait of Hormuz. Do you have an expectation of when that strait is going to be open?
Well, we've already seen an increase in traffic today. Hopefully we'll see an increase in traffic tomorrow. We actually think that we are seeing signs that the Straits is starting to reopen. I think you guys have probably seen oil prices have come down, so I think the oil markets, the gas markets are seeing the same thing. But the president's been very, very clear. The deal is a ceasefire, a negotiation. That's what we give. And what they give is the Straits are going to be reopened. If we don't see that happening, the president is not going to abide by our terms if the Iranians are not abiding by their terms.
Mr. Vice President, Caroline Levitt said you played a key role in these talks. Could you help us understand some details about that role, and do you think your well-known opposition to foreign wars generally was a factor that made you a key player in this?
Well, I appreciate Carolyn saying that. I mean, my key role was I sat on the phone a lot. I answered a lot of phone calls. I made a lot of phone calls. And again, I'm happy about where we are. I think the president has struck a good deal for the American people, but fundamentally, the Iranians have got to take the next step, or the president has a lot of options to go back to the war.
Do you know if Iranians requested that you join the talks?
I don't know that. I would be surprised if that was true. But, I wanted to be involved because I thought I could make a difference. And obviously, I think the people really on the ground doing the day-to-day negotiating have been Steve and Jared. They've done a great job. But we're going to keep on working this as a team, as we always have. Pete's been very helpful with the various military elements of this. Marco's obviously been extremely involved. We work as a team. We work effectively. And, I've been on the phone a lot the past couple of days, but we're glad to be where we are.
Mr. Vice President, how is the United States accomplishing its stated objective of ensuring Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon ever, but they still have highly enriched uranium? And what's the plan to get the uranium out?
Well, look, this is one of the things, it's going to be one of the main subjects of negotiation, is that we want Iran to not be able to make a nuclear weapon. We want the nuclear fuel, which is something the president has made very clear. And there's, again, the way to think about this is the United States has certain demands and certain things that we want. The Iranians have things they can get out of the negotiation. The more that they're willing to give us, I think the more they're going to get things out of this negotiation. The president's talked about sanctions relief. The president's talked about economic partnerships and things like that. That's not going to happen unless the Iranians make a firm commitment to stop anything close to the development of a nuclear weapon. And frankly, the president has all the cards here. We've got a lot of leverage, we've got a lot of things that we can do, but right now I think that we're in a good spot.
Is the threat to wipe Iranian civilization off the map still on the table? Is it fair to keep 90 million Iranians under that threat for the actions of their leaders?
Well, look, the leadership is really to blame for the condition of the country in Iran. The president of the United States has made very clear that the United States has a lot of leverage here. We have economic leverage, we've got military leverage. What he's trying to do is make sure the American people are safe and strike a deal that's good for the American people. I encourage the Iranians to come to the table seriously. We've seen some signs that they're going to do that. We've seen some signs of bravado. Fundamentally, we're in a good spot. They're reopening the straits. We have a ceasefire, and frankly, if they break their end of the bargain, then they're going to see some serious consequences.
But wiping them off the map is different than an economic leverage or military leverage. Why is that kind of language useful in this kind of scenario?
Well, again, the President of the United States is saying that unless the Iranians do the right thing, he is going to have some serious consequences for the regime. We obviously don't want the people of Iran to suffer, but we have a lot of leverage the President of the United States could use, and it's why I think it's so important for the Iranians to be negotiators in good faith.
Okay, X has been abuzz the last couple of days with a Free Press story saying that senior Pentagon officials in January, including Rich Colby, brought Cardinal Pierre into the Pentagon.
Brought who?
Cardinal Christophe Pierre
into
the Pentagon.
I haven't seen this story,
okay,
unfortunately.
And essentially the reporting by the Free Press is that they told him that the American military has a lot of might and they can do whatever they want, and the church should get on its side. Does that message sound correct to you? Is that something you would sign off on?
So one, I with no disrespect to the Cardinal, I don't know who Cardinal Christophe Pierre is.
He's the ambassador to the Holy See in the U.S.
Oh, okay. I've met him before. Sorry, I just didn't remember the name. I've never seen this reporting. I'd like to actually talk to Cardinal Christophe Pierre and frankly to our people to figure out what actually happened. I think it's always a bad idea to offer an opinion on stories that are unconfirmed and uncorroborated, so I'm not going to do that.
Mr. Reza, on the question of Iran's enriched uranium, do you see a scenario in which the administration may be willing to agree to allow Iran to continue enriching uranium for civilian nuclear purposes?
Well, look, what the president has said is that we don't want Iran to have the capacity to build a nuclear weapon. The president's also said that we don't want Iran enriching towards a nuclear weapon, and we want Iran to give up the nuclear fuel. Those are going to be our demands during the negotiation, and again, we're going to see what the Iranians are willing to give up. If they make a good faith effort to actually give us the things that we need to have a successful negotiation for the security of the American people, I think there's a lot on the other end. If they don't give us what we need, then I think it's going to be bad, but I'm optimistic that the Iranians are going to be smart, that they're going to negotiate in good faith.
And your negotiating partner in Iran, and Kevin sort of asked about this already, but he essentially is saying that they're distrustful of the U.S. for, he tweeted out that 3 of the 10 points in the ceasefire framework have already been violated. They're distrustful of the U.S. What do you make of him tweeting that out before negotiation?
So I thought it was interesting, actually, because I did see that tweet from Ghalibaf actually just a couple of minutes ago. And let me say a few things. First of all, he said that there are a few points of disagreement before the negotiation. Well, that must mean that there's a lot of points of agreement because there's a 15-point plan floating around, there's a 10-point plan floating around. If he's frustrated about 3 issues, that actually means that there's a lot of agreement. That's point number 1. Point number 2, to respond to each of those issues, and I read it very closely, let me just say this. I actually wonder how good he is at understanding English, because there are things that he said that frankly didn't make sense in the context of the negotiations that we've had. But to address the 3 points, first of all, he talked about an attack that had allegedly happened on Iran and how that was a violation of the ceasefire. Ceasefires are always messy. An hour after the president announced the ceasefire, the Iranians launched a bunch of missiles. Then the Israelis responded. Then some of the Gulf Arab states responded. This is the nature of a ceasefire. No ceasefire ever goes without a little bit of choppiness. What we have been very clear about is that we want to stop the bombing. We want our allies to stop the bombing, and we want the Iranians to do the same thing. We're seeing evidence that things are going in the right direction, but it's going to take a little time. The second thing Ghalibaf said, which again I found fascinating, is he said, we refuse to give up the right to enrichment. And I thought to myself, you know what? My wife has the right to skydive, but she doesn't jump out of an airplane because she and I have an agreement that she's not going to do that because I don't want my wife jumping out of an airplane. We don't really concern ourselves with what they claim they have the right to do. We concern ourselves with what they actually do, and I think the president's been very clear on the enrichment question. Our position on that has not changed. I think the third thing that he said was Lebanon. Okay, and again, I actually think that is a reasonable misunderstanding, but neither us nor the Israelis said that that was going to be part of the ceasefire. Again, we're working with people to try to get through some of these things, but it's really fundamentally, we're on the right track. We got a lot more to do. We got a lot more that the Iranians are going to have to accept as part of this negotiation, but I think we've got a strong hand and we're going to play it well.